about not having enough money, and it's a complex challenge, complex problem to resolve. A key consideration, I think, wherever you see the problem of poverty around the world, is people not having jobs. And that has to be addressed if we're going to deal with the problem of poverty wherever it arises. Education is key. We've got to make sure that youngsters are able to complete primary school, are able to get the education that they need to be able to gain employment later in their lives, and there's a number of other things that need to be done. But for me, employment, having a job, is right at the heart of solving this problem, whether we're talking about the UK or elsewhere around the world. The number of people living on less than $1.25 per day, that was about a third of the world's population in 1997. Now it's down to about a quarter. Now, through the downturn, we've gone back a bit, although nothing like as far back as we were in 1997. But that means there's some serious repair work to be done in the period ahead. But let's not forget that there has been a lot of progress on this over the last few years, spectacular progress in Southeast Asia, but progress in Africa and in other places as well. There's no doubt we've got a problem, a challenge with poverty in the UK. If you look back to the position when we were elected in 1997, we focused very closely on the problem of child poverty, which seemed to us to be the most serious facet of this challenge. And we were in a position in 1997 where child poverty had more than doubled and where it was at the highest level in the whole of Europe. And really that was the backdrop to the commitment that Tony Blair made as Prime Minister, that we should eradicate child poverty in the UK by 2020. Essentially, we've seen a crisis in the banking system. It started in the USA, but it spread very quickly around the world. The Lehman Brothers collapse, which was perhaps the one single trigger which really brought the problems to a head. We had trouble in the UK with Northern Rock that we nationalised, and then with other banks, and very similar problems right around the world. So it's been a banking crisis above all, and that's why the G20 has been looking internationally at what we need to reform in the regulation of the banks to make sure that these problems don't occur again. The question that faced the UK government, and every government actually, but it was the UK government that really addressed it first. The question was, should we let the banking system collapse? That was the alternative to what we did, to allow the system to collapse with, frankly, unimaginable consequences for everybody in the UK and everybody pretty much around the world. I think there's no doubt at all we made the right judgment to save the banking system. We came forward with a series of proposals which quite quickly then were copied around the world by the US and by others. And it was Gordon Brown's leadership which provided the tools which has enabled us to get through that crisis, and now to see the world economy returning to growth. So we made the right choice there. I mean, absolutely no doubt about that. We need a banking system, but of course, we also need the bankers to be behaving responsibly, and we need to make sure that the investment that taxpayers made in saving those banks is repaid when the banks are sold back into private ownership, as they will be in due course. The Transparency Initiative, again championed by the UK, requiring companies in the extractive industries, mining companies, oil companies, companies digging out diamonds, all those companies required under that initiative to publish the payments that they make each year so that everybody can see how much is being handed over. And I think that'll be a pretty powerful tool for holding to account some of those who in the past have been frankly stealing that money and taking it outside of their countries. And so in a very, very damaging way, undermining the well-being of the people in those countries who are entitled to share in those payments. I believe the Millennium Development Goals and the timetable of 2015 for achieving them, I believe those are realistic, and I believe that was the view that every country took when those goals were signed up to a decade or so ago. But it will require countries in the developed world to honour the pledges that they've made, not to get behind with those commitments, but to stick with them, to do the right thing by the developing world. It isn't just about aid from the developed world. One of the things we were looking at in the G20 was tackling the problem of tax avoidance in the developing world, how we could make sure that countries get the right amount of tax that they're due from companies, multinational companies and others, working in those countries. And one of the ideas is the idea that companies should be required to publish their profits and their tax payments on a country-by-country basis, so everybody can see where the profits are being made, where their taxes are being paid, so we can make sure companies are paying the right amount of tax that's due. It's estimated that at least $50 billion a year are lost to developing countries in tax avoidance, and possibly much more than $50 billion. So we need to work to make sure that the tax havens are not used to take money from developing countries. So there's a lot that needs to be done. But yes, I believe those goals were thought to be realistic when they were signed up to in 2000. I believe they're realistic now, but it does require countries in the developed world to honour the pledges that they've made. In the UK, we've had some very, very powerful and very popular, very well-supported campaigns. The Jubilee 2000 campaign around the time of the millennium, calling for the cancellation of the debts of the poorest countries, which the UK did and others have done as well. Then the Make Poverty History campaign, calling on governments to tackle the problem of severe poverty around the world. That campaign culminated in the G8 summit under UK chairmanship in 2005, and thanks to the leadership which really came from those popular campaigns and the willingness of the British government to sign up to those aims, we saw the big countries signing up to very far-reaching commitments in 2005. In the UK, we're on track to delivering the promises we made then. We need other countries as well, all of them, to honour the commitments that they've made. If we do that, then we can deliver those Millennium Development Goals on time.